Hey beautiful, have you considered subscribing to our channel? Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with artificial sunlight and the low hum of translation fields. 1,000 tongues, a dozen biologies, and countless egos convened beneath a crystalline dome orbiting the dying star of Vuran. Representatives of the core civilizations, species that had ruled the stars for millennia, were arrayed in ascending tiers, each seated behind banners more symbolic than functional. Diplomacy here was not an art. It was a theater of power, and the show had long grown stale. But today, the council's routine pomp was pierced by something foreign: desperation. The Nargathi have breached Carthos Prime's orbital defenses, hissed, a voice thick with static and chitin, emanating from a creature whose many limbs twitched with anxiety. Arch-strategist Grawl of the Takor Federation struck the floor with a spined staff. "We have lost the outer defense net. Their drones infest the skies. Their ground forms are pouring through breach points. We are bleeding systems." Several delegates clicked, murmured, or flashed distress colors. The Nargathi were unlike any prior threat. Not a race, but a swarm. Not conquerors, but devourers. Every species that had tried to negotiate or resist them had been either assimilated or obliterated. Their numbers defied logic. Their tactics were brutally efficient, and worst of all, they adapted quickly. "The Trinal Unity has lost 3 legions," croaked the gelatinous ambassador of the Othari. "We have nothing left to spare." A cold silence followed. This wasn't war. It was collapse. And collapse doesn't negotiate. The voice that broke the silence was soft. A whisper, really. But in the council chamber, that whisper carried more weight than any war cry. Earth has a solution. The delegates turned in unison, some twisting eye stalks, others adjusting mechanical lenses. Ambassador Reed of Terra stood at the lowest level of the council platform, hands clasped behind his back. He was old, visibly, unashamedly so. While most species shed their physical frailty through enhancement or exosuits, Reed wore his age, like armor. Deep lines carved his face. His hair, silver and thin, was tied back. He wore no ceremonial robes, just a simple, pressed uniform that had been out of date for decades. "And what," hissed Grawl, "does a backwater frontier species propose? More mercenaries? Youth battalions? Another AI experiment that will inevitably defect?" "No," Reed said. "We propose men." The chamber erupted into a chaos of light and sound. Banners pulsed with disbelief. A few delegates actually laughed, a deep, warbling echo from the gelatinous seats of the Threx Dominion, and a series of dissonant chords from the Cephalon hegemony. "Humanity offers soldiers," said Rethtal, a towering Saurian whose armored bulk shifted uneasily. "You've had no standing military since the Reformation Accords, and you certainly haven't the youth to field an army." Reed smiled. "We won't send youth. We're sending old men." This time, the laughter turned cruel. "Is this a death ritual?" sneered the voice of the Varnai delegate, a whispering cloud of spores. "Some form of senescent sacrifice? Have you run out of proper warriors?" Reed waited until the mirth died down. "They're not retired," he said. "They're resting. There's a difference." He tapped a control on his sleeve. A projection flickered to life in the center of the chamber. It showed grainy, monochrome footage, ancient by galactic standards. Cities in ruins, skies filled with flame. Men, humans, rushing through smoke with crude weapons and dirt-streaked faces. Tanks, kinetic slug throwers, handheld rockets. The footage changed. Another war, another planet. Massive walkers striding across glaciers, orbital drops, men in patched armor charging against mechanoforms triple their size. Then another, desert warfare, biochemical trenches, zero-G boarding actions. Again and again, small teams of human soldiers, outgunned, outnumbered, outmatched, winning. These men fought wars before your civilizations even knew our name, Reed said quietly. They built their strength in fire and blood, not simulations or strategy holovids. They trained under bullets, not protocols. They survived every apocalypse we could throw at them, and when there were no more enemies, they went home. But they didn't forget. The projection faded. The silence that followed was different this time, heavier. Their bodies are old, Reed said, but their minds are steel. And this war, this one, they've been waiting for something like this. Rithtal leaned forward, his scales rippling with distrust. How many? 50. Another wave of disbelief. You offer 50 aging relics against the hive of Nargathi? I offer you 50 apex predators who've spent decades studying war in boredom. They will move like no soldiers you've seen. They will think in patterns your enemies can't predict. And they will not break. Even if we accept, murmured the delegate from the Myos cartel. What makes you think they'd go? I didn't order them, Reed said. I told them there was a fight. He turned from the podium and walked back to his seat without asking for a vote. The chamber sat in stunned silence for several moments. Then slowly, deliberately, the vote counters began to light. Not with confidence, but with resignation. With hope measured in its smallest unit, desperation. At the edge of Earth's atmosphere, a sleek but unadorned transport vessel rose from the blue arc of the planet below. Its hull bore no insignia, no call sign. It was accompanied by no ceremonial procession. It simply moved, silent, precise, and fast. Inside, there were no fresh-faced recruits, no gleaming new weapons, only silence. A long cabin held men spaced sparsely across worn jump seats. Most sat with arms crossed, heads bowed, or eyes closed. Their uniforms didn't match. Some wore the old gray of the UN Peace Corps, others the sand camo of the Mars Reclamation Force, or the black armor plates of the Earth Colonial Guard. Some had no uniform at all, just boots, scars, and muscle corded with age. Sergeant Macklin stared ahead without blinking. His hands, calloused and knotted, rested on a battered helmet that bore a faded unit patch. He had been out of war for 20 years. He still slept in boots. Across from him, Doc Harris adjusted a case of field meds with surgeon-like precision. His left eye was milky from a plasma burn. He hummed an old Earth tune under his breath, something swingy and long out of fashion. He had the calmness of a man who had seen worse than death and learned to live with it. In the back, Ramirez checked the fuse timing on a series of shaped charges. His cybernetic knee clicked with each motion, but he moved like he'd danced with. Payne made it a partner. He muttered insults in 3 languages at the explosives, daring them to misbehave. Preacher Jones cleaned a long, collapsible rifle with movements that resembled prayer. He had once fought in the orbital sieges of Titan. He had the stare of a man who had made peace with judgment. And Briggs sat at the front, silent, unmoving, his eyes watching the stars like they owed him something. None of them spoke of strategy. They didn't need to. They'd done this before. 1,000 variations of it. The terrain would be different. The enemy's biology unfamiliar. But the war was always the same. When the transport entered jump, the cabin dimmed to red. Briggs finally stood. "Listen up," he said. His voice had no flourish. It cut through the room with the precision of a sharpened knife. "We're dropping on Carthos Prime. Terrain's rough. Hive forms don't negotiate. The locals are expecting failure. Let's not disappoint them." Ramirez chuckled, low and bitter. "Rules of engagement?" Harris asked, his tone bored. Briggs glanced at him. "Don't die." With that, he turned back to his seat. The rest of the cabin remained still. There, was no cheering, no bravado, just a quiet readiness, like the click of a hammer being drawn back. Outside, the stars twisted. The ship vanished into FTL, leaving Earth behind. They were old men, and they were going to war. The atmosphere of Carthos Prime shimmered like a wound. Smoke spiraled from broken towers, and the sun bled through haze in a dull orange smear. What had once been a thriving outpost of interstellar cooperation was now a charred battlefield stitched together by bunkers, crater fields, and the twitching remains of unmanned turrets. The last defensive lines were little more than trench scars etched into glassed soil. The human transport came in low, silent, hugging the terrain like it had something to prove. It didn't request landing clearance. It didn't need it. By the time the alien forward command realized what it was, the landing gear had already crunched into a burned-out supply lot on the edge of Sector D. A squad of Siren auxiliaries stood nearby, 6-foot arthropods wrapped in flak armor and bristling. With plasma rifles, one of them raised a limb and skittered forward, aiming to direct the disembark procedure. Then the hatch hissed open, and everything changed. The first man out was Sergeant Macklin. He moved with a deliberate, coiled grace, like an animal that had forgotten how to relax. His armor was matte black composite, patched and repatched, pitted with heat scarring and marked by old-fashioned painted kill stripes. His eyes scanned the perimeter without expression. Behind him came Briggs, then Harris, Jones, Ramirez, Lowell. One by one, they stepped onto the shattered soil, not like they were entering danger, but like they were returning to it. The Siren. Commander hesitated. These weren't the humans they were used to, young, erratic, overconfident. These men were quiet, heavy, anchored by something the aliens couldn't name. Briggs walked past the commander without breaking stride. "Briefing," he said. It wasn't a question. Inside the command post, little more than a buried bunker, with flickering lights, Briggs and his team stood in the back while the sector's alien brass argued over strategy. A three-eyed Threscari major paced nervously. A digital projection showed the current front line, which had receded another kilometer since morning. "We're losing ground on the southern ridge. Nargathi tunneling units have compromised our rear positions. The trenches are collapsing in places, and we've lost drone access to the underhive. Our AI projections suggest total collapse within 30 hours unless reinforcements arrive." The major turned, expecting questions. What he got instead was silence. Briggs approached the map, studied it for less than 10 seconds, then jabbed a gloved finger at a narrow canyon cutting through the ridge. "This," he said. "That's death," the Threscari warned. "A kill. Box. 3 squads have gone in. None came out." Briggs just nodded. "Then they softened it for us." Ramirez grinned. "It's always nice when someone else digs your grave for you." Lowell, who had yet to speak since the landing, tapped something into a gauntlet-mounted screen and murmured, "Intercepted chatter suggests the Hive command node is behind that ravine, about 1.8 clicks in. Light EM shielding. If we get close, I can cut their comms. Blind the bastards." The major shook his head. "There's no fallback. You'll be isolated." "We've been isolated since we got old," Harris said. Preacher Jones leaned his rifle against the table and began adjusting the scope. "Psalm 23, he murmured. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow." Briggs straightened. "We leave in 20. We'll move quiet. No armor support. We hit the command node, cut the legs out from under the hive, then retreat through the service tunnel here. You won't make it." Briggs paused at the threshold. "Then bury us deep. We'll take a few with us." The old soldiers exited, into the fading light, where the wind carried the scent of plasma, oil, and alien rot. Macklin adjusted the strap of his rifle and checked the position of the sun. "We'll need to hit them before dusk. Less drone activity, better thermal cover." "Rationed. Adrenaline only," Harris said. "No full stims. We're not 20 anymore, just mean." Preacher Jones pulled his hood over his head and took point. "I got eyes on the trail. Let's go make believers out of them. They slipped into the canyon like phantoms. No ceremonial music, no goodbyes, just the sound of boots on ash and the steady, measured rhythm of professionals heading toward something they'd seen too many times. The path narrowed quickly, the canyon walls squeezing them until even the sky was a slit above. Nargathi growths pulsed on the stone, sickly white sacks and black moss that writhed with hive breath. Ramirez knelt beside one, planted a shaped charge, and patted it like an old dog. "Tick, tick," he whispered. "Wake up, ugly." Movement. Up ahead. Macklin raised a fist. The team froze. From the shadows came a slithering rustle. A hive form crested the rocks, 3 meters of carapace and limbs, mandibles dripping. It clicked, tasted the air. Lowell tapped his forearm. Its sensors blinked off. The beast stood there, confused. Then Preacher Jones fired. The suppressed crack was barely a whisper, but the round hit like scripture. The hive form dropped, twitching once before stillness claimed it. "Recon scout," Briggs said. "Notified, nobody." Good. They advanced. A patrol cluster emerged as they neared the gorge's mouth. 6 hive troopers, 2 aerial scouts. Ramirez whispered a curse. No time for stealth. Briggs gave a subtle nod. Macklin moved first. No hesitation. A short burst from his rifle shredded the front line, and before the rest could react, Harris lobbed an arc grenade. The resulting EMP scattered the scouts mid-flight. Preacher picked off the stragglers, silent as breath. In 20 seconds, it was over. "Old but gold," Ramirez muttered, wiping ichor from his visor. Lowell found a service tunnel entry partially buried under a collapsed arch. With some effort, they unsealed it. The scent that wafted out was thick, biological, and wrong. They entered without a word. Inside, the darkness wrapped around them like a second skin. Lowell's interface pinged with a live feed he had tapped. Into the hive's outer network. "Command node is 3 levels down. Weak encryption. They weren't expecting us." "Not yet," Briggs said. They moved like memory through the tunnel system, bypassing nodes, dodging sentries, slitting throats when needed. Every corner turned was another dance with death, but none of them faltered. This was what they were. Not glory seekers, not martyrs, just men who had made violence into a language and never forgotten how to speak it. Finally, they reached the node. It was massive, an organic obelisk pulsing with data threads and pheromone pulses. Guarded, but not heavily. The hive trusted secrecy more than force here. Briggs surveyed the room. "Lowell?" The tech sergeant dropped to one knee, rolled out a compact device the size of a child's lunchbox, and began his work. 2 minutes, he said. "Keep 'em off me." From the shadows, movement stirred. More forms, dozens. "Time to make some noise," Macklin said, setting his stance. They fought without panic, without urgency. Every move was calculated. Every bullet mattered. Ramirez's charges sealed side passages. Harris dropped a hive brute with a point-blank slug to the throat. Preacher Jones covered Lowell with such precision it was like he could see seconds. Ahead, Lowell grinned as the device finished its upload. "They're blind." Briggs activated his comm. "Strike pattern, Earthborn, markers live." Above them, far above, the sky rippled. Hidden satellites, long dormant, activated. Earth tech, old, simple, brutal, locked onto the signal. Then fire fell. The command node exploded with the fury of ancient warfare. Not sleek beams or nanite storms, just raw, unrelenting kinetic energy. The obelisk shattered. The tunnel screamed. The team retreated through fire and collapse, dodging falling stone and thrashing limbs. They didn't look back. When they emerged, onto the ridge, bloodied and breathless, the horizon was burning. The Nargathi were reeling, panicked, uncoordinated, blind. Alien soldiers all along the line watched as the old men emerged from the smoke. A Siren trooper lowered his rifle in stunned silence. "You," he began. We softened it for you, Briggs said, brushing dust from his shoulder. He didn't wait for a response. As the others filed past the stunned defenders, Preacher Jones smiled and gave the trooper a pat on the shoulder. Now go finish your war. Behind them, the hive began to collapse. The Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session. Visuals streamed in real-time from Carthos Prime, fed directly to the crystalline dome above the chamber. What the delegates saw defied prediction. The hive formations, once unstoppable, had fractured. Nargathi attack patterns, previously elegant in their brutality, were now erratic. Swarms lost cohesion. Command structures faltered. The alien war machine, long presumed infallible, bled confusion, and at the heart of it stood the humans. 50 old men, advancing through flame and smoke with the calm precision of executioners. Not one wasted movement. Not one hesitated. They weren't here to inspire. They were here to dismantle. Grawl of the Takor shifted his weight on his coiled legs, uneasy. How are they doing this? The Mayo's delegate blinked her multiple eyes in rhythmic sequence. They're using asymmetrical techniques, blending guerrilla warfare with direct sabotage. Their methods are unpredictable, inefficient by our standards, but devastatingly effective, finished Rithtal. He turned toward the central. Stream, watching as a team of humans, Briggs' team, slipped into an enemy node and emerged moments later as the structure erupted behind them. These men, the Varnai ambassador rasped, are not following standard command protocols. They don't need to, said Reed from his seat at the Terran table. His tone held no triumph, only quiet satisfaction. They've lived long enough to stop asking permission. Back on Carthos Prime, the war had changed. No longer was it a static defense against waves. The old soldiers had seized the initiative, dragging the Nargathi into unfamiliar terrain, both physically and tactically. Where the hive adapted fast, the humans adapted faster, weaponizing their experience like a contagion. Briggs crouched at the edge of a shattered overpass, eyes locked, on a crumbling highway below. A Nargathi reinforcement column advanced. 3 tank-like bioforms surrounded by a throng of infantry drones. Flanking positions were minimal. Straightforward kill zone. Too straightforward. He muttered into his throat mic. Preacher, you got eyes? High perch. West spire. Range 1.5 clicks. Targets? Left beasts leading with, its carapace angled north. Weak vent line on the 3rd vertebra. I can crack it. Do it. A second passed. Then a single shot cracked through the battlefield. The lead bioform spasmed, toppled, and rolled into its flankmate, crushing a knot of infantry beneath it. Chaos erupted. The swarm panicked, scattering in all directions. From the shadows beneath the overpass, Macklin and Ramirez emerged. Macklin dropped a thermal charge onto the middle tank, while Ramirez waded into the drones, his shotgun booming in tight bursts. Their movements were slow by modern standards, but efficient, as though each step had been planned in 1,000 other wars. Lowell looped a drone's signal into the hive's command band, feeding false movement data upstream. Harris stood at the rear, dispensing chemical suppressants to keep their nerves steady. There was no shouting, no panic, just action. 10 minutes later, the entire enemy formation was reduced to wreckage. Preacher met them on the ridge, his long rifle slung over one shoulder. He looked tired. Thought I'd have to shoot more than one, he said. Briggs surveyed the carnage. Let 'em wonder which bullet ends them. Fear's heavier than steel. Lowell raised an eyebrow. We're burning hot. Sooner or later, they'll adapt. They always do. Briggs nodded. That's why we don't stay in one place. Next phase, we move north. There's a sub-hive array beneath the verdant basin. We kill that. We choke their tactical net in this hemisphere. You do realize, Harris said dryly, that we've outpaced the main army. There's no backup behind us anymore, Briggs. Just looked at him. That was true the day we landed. The old soldiers pressed on. Across the battlefield, other human teams followed similar paths. 50 had deployed, 46 remained. 4 had died, 2 in silent tunnel collapses, 1 shielding a squad of young Siren soldiers from a detonation, 1 by holding a bridge long enough for a retreat. None had been captured. None had broken. And wherever they went, the story followed. Alien troops, those who once regarded humans with polite indifference, now watched them with wide eyes. Young recruits from other species stood straighter when the humans passed. They whispered their names. They began to mimic their methods. Where once there had been only defense, now there was motion. Precision. Counterattack. The Nargathi noticed, and they changed. A new class of hive soldier emerged. Taller, faster, independent of swarm commands. They carried pattern disruptors and EM-null fields, specifically designed to block the tools the humans favored. Briggs's unit encountered them first during the push toward the verdant basin. Ramirez was the first to fall, one leg crushed beneath a debris trap he didn't see coming. Harris dragged him out of the kill zone while Lowell laid suppressive fire. The new hive soldiers didn't act like drones. They anticipated, they flanked, they thought. Not bad, Macklin growled between shots. They're learning. Briggs ducked behind a twisted support beam, flipping through tactical overlays. So we teach harder. He tapped a code into his HUD. Jones, pull the rabbit. From a separate ridge, Preacher opened a case none of them had touched since landing. Inside were Earth artifacts, improvised tech, outlawed in polite warfare, banned by treaty and moral code. The kind of things built not for deterrence but for cruelty. He activated 2 of them. On the battlefield, gravity folded. The Nargathi soldiers, already adapted to human bullets, suddenly found their own footing unstable, their sense of balance shredded. One stumbled, then another. A moment later, the sound scrambler kicked in, disorienting their echolocation pulses. And in that brief window of confusion, the humans struck. They didn't wipe the field. They didn't need to. They reminded the Nargathi that evolution was not enough. Ramirez's injuries slowed him, but not by much. Harris rigged a temporary brace from parts of an enemy's carapace, and the man walked again in under an hour. Pain didn't scare them. Time didn't matter. The mission was forward. After the basin strike, with the tactical net in ruins, the Nargathi began to retreat for the first time. Not en masse, just a ripple. But it was enough. The Galactic Council received the footage 3 hours later. This time, the chamber was silent, not from disbelief, but reverence. They broke them, the Otharii ambassador said softly. 46. Humans, muttered the Cephalon speaker. Against an entire hive vector. It is obscene. Reed stood, but he did not speak. He merely activated a file, an old mission report from Earth's ancient conflicts. The file's title read, Operation. Last Standard. Below it, footage played of elderly soldiers fighting in mountain passes, street corners, trenches of forgotten wars, men who had never stopped moving forward. They've always done this, Reed said. They only ever needed permission. And, when they fall? Asked the Mayo's delegate. Reed's eyes didn't waver. Then they fall standing. Far from the council, beneath a burning sky, Briggs stood atop a rise overlooking the retreating edge of the hive. The war wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time, the tide had turned. Beside him, Preacher Jones said a quiet word into the wind. The sky above Carthos Prime was a deep, endless red, fractured with streaks of stormlight and the flickering remnants of orbital debris. Every breath tasted of smoke, ionized ash, and something older, like the ghosts of burned-out cities and forgotten battles. Briggs felt it all in his bones. Each step over the cracked terrain echoed through his spine. Pain had become a quiet companion, constant but familiar. He ignored it. They all did. Pain was a story the body told when it was still trying to live. Ahead, the final hive node loomed, a vast pulsating mound of bioarchitecture built into the mountain range's base. According to Lowell's scans, it housed the last operational control cluster on the continent. If they brought it down, the entire front would collapse. No command, no cohesion. The hive would break like a dammed river under impact. 42 of them remained. The Council hadn't sent reinforcements. They hadn't needed to. Other units, alien and human alike, had begun rallying to the strategy the old soldiers had reintroduced, not one of overwhelming firepower, but of disruption, of relentless psychological pressure. Hit, fade, hit again, make the enemy think. They were everywhere at once. But this last push wasn't about disruption, it was finality. Briggs stood with his team on a ridge overlooking the target. His gaze swept over the swarm patterns, the guard nodes, the canyon route that led to the core chamber. Too many entry points. Too few men. Lowell's voice was quiet in his ear. Outer defense nests scan for active biosignatures. No way in, unless we ghost the whole team or distract the hell out of them. We can't ghost 42 men, Harris said. They'll see it. Smell it. Briggs ran a hand down the grip of his rifle. His knuckles cracked as he curled them. They won't smell us, because only 5 are going in. He turned to face the group. Time had worn deep into every face, scarred, sun-hardened, full of quiet fury and old sadness. But none of them flinched. Preacher stepped forward first. Reckon it's us, then. Lowell didn't speak, just started recalibrating the hacking node strapped to his arm. Ramirez, limping now with his makeshift brace, simply nodded. Guess this is the part of the story where we make it loud. Macklin cocked his head. You. Sure about this, Briggs? Briggs looked over the others, then to the horizon, where a faint rumble signaled a new shift in the enemy line. I'm sure enough. You get the rest of them clear. Pull the Council forces into position for mop-up. When this node drops, everything goes. You'll feel it. Harris stepped up, slung his rifle, and extended a hand. They clasped arms. Old war style. Don't make it look too easy. Briggs smiled faintly. We're old. Nothing looks easy anymore. The 42 men split silently. 5 stayed. Lowell, Macklin, Ramirez, Preacher, and Briggs moved into the canyon at dusk. They didn't wear stealth suits. They didn't need them. Their presence was a signal. If the Nargathi could still feel fear, they'd start feeling it. Now, as they approached the first guard nest, Lowell reached into the net and scrambled it mid-pulse. The nest blinked, then fell silent. Won't be that easy again, he muttered. They're adapting. They'll adapt to dying too, Macklin growled and stepped ahead. They advanced in short bursts. Hive sentries rushed to meet them. Each time, the old soldiers met them with discipline that defied age and fatigue. Macklin led the vanguard, his rifle singing in rhythmic bursts. Ramirez covered the rear with mines and short-range blasts that funneled the enemy like cattle into a slaughter chute. Lowell managed to slice into a secondary node long enough to project their location across every enemy sub-frequency. That'll bring 'em, he said, sweat streaming down his brow. Briggs looked toward the towering command structure, now glowing faintly with violet biolight. Good. We want them watching. They reached the base of the node. The entrance was an orifice, a yawning thing that pulsed like a heartbeat, rimmed with bone ridges and twitching nerve matter. Preacher knelt and murmured something under his breath before entering. Inside, the air thickened. It was moist and choked with pheromonal haze, designed to overload the senses of anything not hive-born. They pressed on. Lowell led them toward the node's spinal core, guided by heat traces and pulsing data. The core's just ahead, he whispered. Shielded. I'll need 90 seconds. You'll get 60, Briggs said. The chamber was shaped like a cathedral and stank of life and death in equal measure. The central node rose like a monolith, flesh and crystal, humming with low vibrations. Hive forms encircled it. Dozens. Macklin didn't wait. He opened fire, flanking left as Ramirez blew a trench through the wall to force confusion. Preacher covered the breach, his rifle barking scripture into the charging tide. Briggs stood beside Lowell, firing in controlled bursts, feeding him time. Lowell dropped to one knee and plugged into the node's exposed conduit. Too many signal layers. They've fortified since the last one, damn it! Give me cover! Briggs stepped forward, fired, dropped two, turned. His left pauldron shattered under a spike round, and blood soaked through his side, but he didn't slow. Macklin went down hard under a hive brute, his shoulder wrenched out of socket as he wrestled it away from Preacher. Preacher shouted something, dragged him clear, and dropped the brute with a clean shot through the eye socket. Ramirez screamed as a sliver breached his thigh, but stayed standing. They were failing, but not fast enough for the enemy. Lowell screamed in triumph. "I'm in!" The chamber vibrated. The node's pulse changed rhythm. Outside, across the region, Nargotha units froze, staggered, collapsed. Briggs stepped toward the core, now crackling with internal overload. He planted the final charge. "I'll stay," he said. Lowell turned, breath ragged. "The overload will take the whole mountain. You'll never outrun it." "I don't plan to." Macklin tried to rise. Briggs knelt, pushed him back down. "Tell them what you saw," he said. "That old men came here, and they remembered who they were." Ramirez looked at him, pain blazing in his eyes. "You can't mean—" Preacher stepped forward. "He means it." There was no time for speeches. Briggs activated the charge. Lowell yanked the others toward the tunnel as the node began to shake. Briggs stayed. He turned back toward the core and stood still, eyes locked on the heart of the hive. When the mountain tore open, it sounded like the earth screaming. Above, on distant ridgelines, alien soldiers and human forces watched as the explosion consumed the peak. Smoke clawed into the atmosphere like a pillar to the gods. And from its heart, silence bloomed, pure and perfect. The hive fell still. In orbit, the council watched the readings fall flat. Every signal, every command burst, every biological broadcast, gone. The war on Carthos Prime was over. A week later, under a scarlet dawn, the survivors gathered near the impact site. 41 remained. Ramirez had died of his wounds en route to evac. He hadn't cried out. He'd simply looked up at the sky, grinned once, and whispered, "Hell of a run." Preacher Jones delivered the eulogy. He didn't speak of glory or flags or the long memory of war. He spoke of men, of choices, of walking forward when the world turned away. He spoke of Briggs, who had never wanted command, but had taken it anyway because someone had to stand first. He ended with a single line. He died like he lived, on his own terms, and never turning back. When it was done, the council offered Earth a commendation, a monument, a new classification for the Terran Veteran Corps. Reed, Earth's representative, refused all but one. A single plaque was installed at the site of the final battle. It bore no names, no banners, just one sentence etched deep into the stone. Here stood the last men who never stopped walking. And across the stars the story spread, not of gods, not of superweapons, but of old human soldiers who stepped onto the battlefield and made the galaxy remember what fear felt like.